So you want to process your flights into your carbon footprint. So your company makes many flights throughout the year. How much carbon do they contribute to your emissions total? This video is in two parts. The first part is looking at the theory behind it all. And, if you're not so interested in that, just skip to the second part where I show you what we do in practice. Okay, great. Let's get into it. So in terms of the flights, the theory, let's just have a look at is it important first off, and just some of the factors around it. First off, aviation fuel, which is what these things burn, is very similar to diesel. I mean, diesel crops up in many different names. They add different sort of elements to it to make it freeze at different points and to, strangely enough, adjust the way it burns. So very similar to diesel to start with. This is an Airbus A380, which when fully laden will take 72,000 gallons of fuel, which is 380,000 litres. If you convert that at 1 litre of aviation fuel to 2.52 kilograms of CO2, you get a complete tank on one of these babies is almost 1,000 tons. I mean, that's a fair whack. That's a fair whack. And sometimes when you're flying from, for example, Europe down to New Zealand, Australia, etc., or from parts of America across to the Far East, you'll be using the majority of that. Other factors that you should consider, but no one does, is what's the carbon emissions for the design of the plane, the manufacture of the plane, the disposal of the plane, the maintenance of it, which is a lot. I'm slightly involved with that in one of my past careers, and there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining a plane. All the airport services, all the admin, and well to tank, i.e. getting the fuel out of the ground and into the tank of this beast. It also doesn't take into consideration anything to do with the getting to or from the airport. So that's also excluded in what I'm about to show you. Okay, should be in there, just isn't. Okay, and I suspect in a few years' time, revised factors will come out with that will incorporate all of these, but nothing just yet. And I'm speaking in early 2022 at the moment. Okay. So let's have a look at a typical profile of a flight. You can see it's made up of various components. Obviously, the takeoff and the landing, we're all very keen when it lands, aren't we? But, that's the typical profile. Again, it's simplified. Again, you should take different cruise times at different heights. I know that planes do change height as they cruise along for different reasons. But this is simplified down to a single height figure. You've got the speed of the plane, the mass of the plane, and then later on we'll be looking at the ratio of the way up, the ascent, the way down to the cruise time, which is critical and changes which factor you look at. If you spend all of your time, I've flown quite a few times from London to Edinburgh, and you spend all your time getting up. Once you're up there, you're briefly up there, just enough time for a pack of peanuts and a gin and tonic, and then you're straight back down again. So you need to take these things into consideration. So the things that sort of drive the fuel use are going to be how high you are, and the height determines how long it's going to take you to get up to that height. How much acceleration do you need from those engines to push you up to the cruising height. Also, when you're up there, the air is thinner, so you can save fuel by flying at a higher height because the air is less dense, less air resistance. Obviously, the speed of the plane, the faster you go, the more you're going to burn. Simple as that. The distance you've gone, that's the cruise time on this chart here. And then, as I say, the ratio, the ascent time to the cruise time to the descent time. I know there's a couple of ratios in there, but you get my point. How much time is spent cruising compared to getting up there and then getting down again. Okay. Finally, you've got the mass of the plane, and of course that takes into consideration the mass of the passengers on the plane. Okay. So we're going to need, critical in that, are the distance and the flight profile, i.e. how much of the, I know it's not a ratio, it's got 3 parts, but going up to cruising to going down. Okay, that's one thing we're going to need. Once we've got the carbon figured out, once the plane has burnt X litres or X kilograms of fuel, then how do we go about allocating the carbon down to individual passengers on the flight? Again, it's simplified. Again, there's a lot of simplification just to make it workable. But what we do is we base it on the space taken in the plane. So, for example, we treat first class passengers with more space to have a higher proportion of the carbon than business class. Business is higher than premium economy, and premium economy is higher than economy. Okay, so again, what do we need to know before calculating the carbon allocation of a flight to an individual passenger? We need to know the class, and that's, as I say, that dictates the amount that you're allocated. Funny enough, it's not taken into consideration whether you're the only passenger on the plane or not. It kind of assumes standard loading factors. And sometimes, especially in these COVID times, that's not entirely true. But again, to simplify it, it's just assuming a standard loading of the plane. What does one additional first class, one additional business, etc. take up? Okay. What else do we need to know? Nothing, really. You've got three key pieces of information. You've got the class, whether it's first, business, premium economy, or economy. That, as I say, drives the allocation of the carbon. You've got the distance, which should really be, when you work it out, the great circle distance between two airports. And there's all calculations and sort of charts out there if you want to look that up. You can look up the longitude and latitude of an airport and then figure out the great circle distance to the longitude and latitude of a different airport. Then you've got the profile of the flight. Now, you should have a whole range of different profiles, but you don't. You know, in reality, you've got a choice of four, and the last one's a bit of a cop-out. So the first one is a short-haul flight. For that, they assume there's a very short cruise time, and actually a lower height as well. Most domestic flights don't go as high. Then you've got short haul, which is, for example, you know, dotting around Europe or dotting between the states in USA, where you've got sort of a medium allocation. Then you've got long haul, where they assume, you know, quite a minor ascent and descent time compared to the cruise time. The fourth category, and these are all government figures, so these are all published in tables by the government, is the international category. And that's defined as any flight which doesn't either take off or land, or take off and land in the UK. And it's a bit of a cop-out. You shouldn't really have that. You should really classify all your flights as domestic, short haul, or long haul. But hey, you know, I don't get to make the rules. I'm just showing you what people do to calculate it. And again, I suspect that in the fullness of time, international might should disappear as a category. Okay, that's the theory. You need to know the class, the distance, the profile factor, and with that you can calculate the carbon. So let's take a look now at, you know, what does that actually mean in practice? Do you have to do all of that sort of messing around in order to get to, you know, the carbon figure? So let's have a look at Plato. Let's see how Plato tackles it. Okay, so this is Plato. This is the new dashboard. It's not quite been released yet. This is coming out in February 2022. So a bit of a sneak peek for you. And flights, if we go into data here. Drum roll. Where are flights? Flights are here. This is a test account. This is the WeCare PLC test account. And here are the flights. And the way we do it in Plato is, first off, we look at defining, I'm clicking on the routes here. We're defining different routes. And let's say, for example, that I'm flying from, let's say we've got a flight from London to Heathrow. No, sorry, Heathrow to JFK. Very common amongst some of the UK guys. So let's say London to USA, and let's say that I am going business class. Yeah, why not treat myself, eh? As a return flight, and it's coming from LHR Heathrow, and we're going to be flying into JFK. John F. Kennedy Airport. And I think Plato's got, from memory, I think it's got about 9,500 airports loaded into it. Yeah, it's a fair few. Let's just click again, and you see two things happen. The submit button appears, which means we can now save that. Second, it's done a lot of calculations. So it's figured out the distance on the Great Circle between Heathrow and JFK. It's 5,500 kilometers. It's figured out what type of flight class to use, which, if you remember, goes back to that profile thing, you know, figures that out, long haul, and what the carbon emissions will be for one person in that category business. Just an interesting note. Let's have a look. If I went economy, what would that do to it? It will lower it down significantly. You know, look at that. 1638 business, 4751. Let's just have a sneaky peek at first. So let's have a look. First class, wow, a whopping 6,553 kilograms, i.e. 6.5 tons. Let's stick to business. Let's submit that. We've now created a route. Where is it? London, USA. Here it is down here with all the factors in it here. And then what we can do is we can back into Plato, back into the flights section rather. And then we can just say, well, how many flights of that type were taken in the year? Let's just say I took one in June. There it is. And you can see that one popping up there in June. And that's worked out the carbon. It's worked out the carbon for the year, added it all up, etc. And you can see the effect there. If we were to repeat the flight, let's say we go back again. Let's say we went back again in October, back again in September. And let's say there was a sales conference in February where 10 staff went across. Put it in there, and you can see suddenly you've got really quite a significant chunk being allocated there. So that process again, into routes, define a route, add a new route in here, put the parameters into it that you need, and then back into flights and just type in, you know, how many times that flight was taken. So there you go. Theory, practice. Theory, there's quite a lot in it actually. I've done it all in Excel. It was, you know, when I was testing all the software out, and there's quite a lot in it. It's quite good fun. You can do it all yourself, or as I say, practice in Plato. Really quite straightforward. You know, you need the airport, from, to, the class, and that's about it. It works out the rest for you. So there you go. I hope that was useful. As ever, if you've got any questions at all to do with net zero, carbon neutrality, or any of the compliances, you know, I deal with UK compliances, but net zero applies worldwide. But if you're ESOS, SECR, anything like that, let me know. Either drop a note down underneath in the comments section and the team will pick it up, or you can ping me an email or ping the team an email, go into the chat, whatever it works for you. Very happy to hear from you, and very happy to see if I can help with your sort of questions as and when they come up. So there you go. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next time.